Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is another Monday morning post divisional round weekend here on FBC Radio Live, and we have our final four teams, and I think we're getting set up for a pretty nice conference championship weekend, especially if it follows what we saw this weekend, which I thought was some pretty good football. Specifically, though, John, I thought we got some really, really great performances from quarterbacks, both on the winning and losing teams this weekend. I thought Jordan Love played particularly well. Obviously, the interceptions he's going to have to live with. But there was a very Brett Favre-esque throw that he made on the sidelines, very Aaron Rodgers-esque, like that should keep Packers fans pretty excited throughout the offseason about the future of that team. And of course, last night we had a great matchup between obviously Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Despite the Bills coming up short, I thought you can make an argument that Josh Allen might have been the best player on the field, but both quarterbacks were pretty spectacular throughout. And again, not necessarily the most competitive game for Detroit and Tampa Bay. I think here's the thing, John. I said it a long time ago, and I'll keep saying it. The Baker Mayfield story is nice, but if you're Tampa Bay, I think you just walk away. You consider what you got out of him, the absolute most you're going to get, because I think that's true. He had a career year, I think, in a pretty good situation for him. I don't think it's going to happen again. And if you believe or see some of the numbers that are being thrown around about what he could get in his next contract, if you're the Buccaneers, wipe your hands clean and walk away. I mean, you have so many other priorities within that team and other issues that I just don't think Baker Mayfield's the guy. And unfortunately for Bucs fans, I think the recency bias, the nice story that it was this season is going to cloud judgment, and I think he's going to get a long-term contract from the Buccaneers, and I think they're going to ultimately regret it. So a lot of things happening this weekend, John.
Who should Tampa Bay walk away to, though? I mean, Kyle Trask, who's been there for 3 years and apparently isn't the next guy.
Right, which I agree. The problem, John, is just the money. There was numbers being thrown out there like 35, 40 million, John. For 3 years,
kind of the going rate for all the quarterbacks. I mean, Daniel Jones got what, $45 million, and got.
Do you think the Giants are happy that they gave him that money? You know what I mean?
No, but I would take Baker Mayfield over Daniel Jones.
Oh sure. No, I'm saying Baker Mayfield's a nice quarterback. I'm not saying he's terrible. I think it would be, and I know that I understand that's the going rate, and this is what teams do. I just think it's going to be a mistake to give him a long-term deal. And by long, I mean 3 years, because it's like, look, you're the Buccaneers. You have some really nice, certainly on defense, you have some nice talent. They draft well, John. So I think you just take that money and reinvest it elsewhere on the line. I mean, what are you going to do with Mike Evans? Mike Evans is a free agent this year. You're going to have to shell out some money for that, or you're going to have to reinvest that somewhere else. So I think the Buccaneers, again, it's kind of like with the coach. Do I think Todd Bowles is a great long-term solution for them? No. But unfortunately for them, I think he played himself into keeping his job by virtue of making the playoffs and getting to the divisional round, which, I understand. But, if you take the sport speak or the sport, whatever you want to call it, out of it and just kind of take those goggles off, you realize, well, maybe you might give him like a nice reward for what he did this year, but I future performance, I think it would be kind of silly to think of him as a long-term solution. That's just my opinion.
Well, at least with coaches, I mean, obviously it doesn't count against the salary cap. Right. It doesn't have to be that long. And look, Mike McCarthy's going into a lame duck season with the Cowboys. They're not even. I know
that's yeah.
Which to me is kind of crazy.
Either move on from him or at least give him a 1 year extension. Give him something. Exactly. It doesn't mean you have to keep him for the next 2 years, but like.
Yeah, I'm sure Jerry Jones can afford $10 million if he gives him a $10 million extension, and it doesn't work out, and then he moves on from him. To have a coach in a lame duck season makes no sense, because the players aren't going to take him seriously. They're going to look at him and go, well, this guy's days are numbered.
Well, certainly a team like Dallas, we saw kind of some dissension between CD Lamb and Dak and how that season ended for him. So they're not in a good place to begin with. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as Todd Bowles, yeah, he probably earned himself a state of execution in Tampa Bay by getting to the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and they were competitive yesterday. Look, it was 17-17 going into the fourth quarter. His defense failed him, and one of Baker's interceptions was more on Mike Evans than on Baker. Baker kept him in the game, but he just wasn't able to come up with a big play to maybe even that game up and get it into overtime. So, yeah, I mean, I think he is a good, solid quarterback, but limited. Can you do better? Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out where. I thought going into the season, Tampa would be in contention for one of the top 3 draft choices. So they really overachieved, in my opinion. And, maybe I thought they would be in the stakes for Caleb Williams or Drake May or one of the really good young quarterbacks. And look, maybe they trade up for that. Who knows? But, yeah, I think Baker came up a little bit short, no pun intended, yesterday. But, yeah, you're right. There were a lot of really good quarterback performances. Jordan Love was good for, 9% of the game, and then those interceptions were a disaster, especially the first one, because that may have been a touchdown.
Right.
If he throws an accurate pass to the tight end, he may walk in for a touchdown, and that game is completely different. I thought Green Bay played a solid game and deserved to win if they just tighten up a few little things there. They struggled in the red zone. Maybe just take a field goal early rather than going fourth down and kind of rushing into like a play where you're trying to push the quarterback forward. Look, that thing works in Philadelphia because the quarterback is 6'1", 240 pounds and can squat like 600 pounds. Not every quarterback is built for the push, right? Like Josh Allen is because he's just a freak. I mean, he kind of creates his own push. But, Green Bay probably, again, that seems to be something that happens with Green Bay every year in the playoffs. Is like 3 or 4 plays you look back and go, man, if they just executed a little better there, they win. Well, they didn't.
Well, and look, San Francisco, which I don't think it was terribly surprising, started slow. I didn't think they were going to, but it was certainly a possibility. We saw that with the Ravens too. They kind of, it took them a series or two to really get going, and I think, if you look at San Francisco and I for a minute I'm like, oh man, I'm sitting here talking about San Francisco has a clear path to the Super Bowl in that first quarter. So I'm like, oh, maybe I jinxed them a little bit with how confident I was speaking about it. But again, they kind of settled down. I mean, you had to adjust without Deebo Samuel. I think that's obviously something to monitor moving forward, and obviously the health. But Kittle's healthy, Purdy's healthy. I thought he played I mean, again, just like the rest of the team, I thought they were sluggish to start, and that kind of gave you some concerns. But by the end of it, I think he had settled down, and I think going into next week, they're going to be a lot sharper from the get-go. Especially, again, you're hosting the NFC Championship game, you're going up against the Lions team, and look, the Lions, it's hard to hammer down how you feel about the Lions going into this week, because I think we all understand that they're obviously a good team. They have a very good offense. The things that they can do on offense are great, but I don't know if some of the aggressiveness is going to necessarily work against San Francisco. And I think San Francisco is a significantly harder opponent than Tampa Bay. And, it was kind of a game for a little bit between the Lions and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it seemed like Detroit abandoned their run game early, and they went to it a little bit later. And you look at Goff, he struggled, I thought, in the first 3 quarters, was averaging like 4 yards per pass attempt. And then in the fourth quarter, he was really, really good. I mean, I think he's one of these quarterbacks that people just never want to give enough credit to. I kind of think he's Matt Ryan, right? I mean, I know Matt Ryan got to a Super Bowl. Goff was the playoff, was an MVP candidate in 2018. Got to a Super Bowl, didn't play well in the Super Bowl. We know that. Matt Ryan was pretty good against the Patriots in that Super Bowl. They were up 28-3, and then all broke loose from that point forward. But I mean, he's a solid quarterback, and I give him a lot of credit because he was traded from the Rams to Detroit, and instead of pouting and saying, "Man, I went from the Rams to Detroit," he just put his nose down and just got better every single year. And now they're in the NFC Championship game. But you're going to have to see him play. I wouldn't say a perfect game because that's difficult to expect, but play a little bit better than he did yesterday, especially the first 3 quarters.
Right.
And again, check the weather, because I don't think Brock Purdy can play in any kind of inclement weather. I really don't. I mean, it seems like when the rain was falling, he really struggled. Balls were sailing, and very easily had 2 balls touchdowns by the Packers.
Yeah,
Donald Savage. There's a pick six right there for him, and he drops the ball. I guess that's why they're playing in the secondary and they're not wide receivers. But I think if the weather's inclement at some point, sometimes they get rain in Northern California. That he struggles a little bit with that.
And maybe I'm just maybe I'm not remembering. Isn't he dealing with a little bit of a thumb issue too?
I think so.
Yeah. So
I think they're all kind of banged up at this point. But I think he's got some sort of issue
which doesn't help when it's risen. I think, like I said, I think that the 49ers just looks sloppy. You know what I mean, to start the game in general. But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see. Obviously, I think people are the coverage of Brock Purdy is very strange. It's like people want to prove that he's the same level as some of these other quarterbacks, but if you base it on the small sample size that you have, I mean, he's played at a very high level for pretty consistently. Now, again, you want to. You can make a better case for him if this week and looks like the guy who, in some cases, was tossing 4 touchdowns and throwing for almost 400 yards, in the regular season. So if he does that, I think, the pro Purdy crowd will have a much better case. But I think he's been pretty good. I mean, again, I just thought the entire team was rusty to start yesterday, and so I don't want to put it all on his shoulders because I mean he wasn't great. The entire team was kind of a little sloppy. I think Kittle, didn't he drop like a pretty easy pass? It just early on. Exactly. So I like
usually money.
Right. So by the end of it, I mean, look, San Francisco, I think you're going to see come out this weekend against the Lions and really look more like the team that we saw for most of the season because, again, just the like I said, I think just the week off really kind of slowed down their momentum a bit. So, and like
one more thing too,
Ian,
as far as Kyle Shanahan, look, I think he's a sensational coach. He's going to his 4th NFC Championship game in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Really rebuilt that program with John Lynch. But he is sometimes frustrating in his play calling because when he should be aggressive, he gets very conservative. Like at the end of the second quarter, like he didn't seem to be in any rush to move the ball down the field. He was trying to nail it that they were going to score at the buzzer. Like, you don't have to do that. And then sometimes when he should be conservative, he just opens things up. See that quarter of the Super Bowl loss against the Patriots, and even to a point, the Super Bowl loss against Kansas City. He was up 10 and running the football effectively. And at that point in the fourth quarter, with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, he decided to turn the Garoppolo. Instead of just continuing his run game. Like, I think he tries to outsmart himself and the opponent a little bit too much. And when you've got a team like that, maybe you don't have to do that.
Right. And look, I mean, that's Braden's in the chat now. Like he'll know as well because of and certainly Eagles fans the early criticism of Andy Reid, as great of a coach as he was, in a lot of instances when it came down to it. Now different issues he had than Kyle Shanahan, but still things that were like, okay, this is a great coach, but why does he have so many issues when it comes to managing the clock or just this penchant for calling the worst timeouts, not calling the right ones? And you can say that about Kyle Shanahan when it comes to play calling, because you're right. I mean, it's the same issue over and over again. And I saw someone tweet this or say this, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like, your biggest issues are revealed in your playoff losses. When you think about, because look, throughout the season you can pinpoint and pick apart flaws and of teams and players and coaches and all that stuff, and it's such a big sample size. So one week you might have a point, the next week you're proven completely wrong. But when it comes down to it, when you get eliminated from the postseason, your biggest flaws are what is evident. I mean, you look at the Bills.
Right.
Mismanaging a defense that necessarily wasn't that great against good team. I mean, all these issues were magnified, and again, another thing that was magnified was Josh Allen was essentially their team. They went as he went. So you can say the same thing about Kyle Shanahan and his coaching ability, because where have a lot of these issues come up, John? Well, in the playoffs, when things get dicey and when you're really, really up against it, these issues really come out, and that could be concerning for San Francisco.
Do you realize that was the first game he's won? I think he was 0-30 when his team was down by 5 or more points entering the fourth quarter.
Really?
That's the first time that's amazing. Now, you can put that on the quarterback, too.
Oh, sure. But, yeah.
You've had Garoppolo and Purdy, and they're good, and good game managers, that's a term. But, I'm sure if Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or whoever had been quarterbacking in San Francisco at some point over the last 5 or 6 years, they would have found a way to come back from a 5-point deficit in the fourth quarter. But that maybe has to do with, again, he gets conservative in the wrong moments and he gets a little too risky in the wrong moments. And again, he's still a young guy and learning his way around this. And, maybe he can just look and say, okay, I made these mistakes. He's going to be self-reflect. The thing we got to realize, a lot of these coaches, pretty much all 32 of them in the NFL, have massive egos. And they're convinced that the way they do things is the correct way to do it. And they're not going to change. So you're going to have to see what happens as we go forward.
Yeah, and look, I mean, no one's, these are little flaws, like I said, that just get magnified in the bigger moments. So, in a week 6 game and, at home, it's not really a big deal. But when you're going into the conference championship game or maybe the Super Bowl, well, yeah, I mean, every one of those decisions matter. And if he tightens up or starts getting, instinctually making the wrong choice, then again, I mean, San Francisco is going to only go as far as that. So, but yeah, I thought we got some really good quarterback play. I think the teams that were expected to win, the only game that was really kind of in question, at least in terms of going into it, was the Kansas City and Buffalo game. Again, we picked all 4 home teams, I believe, right? We were in sync with that.
No, I picked Kansas City.
Okay, all right. So you were obviously wiser than I was. But the point was the first 3 games
I'm older. You can say that.
Right.
On that. I'm older.
Right. You've more experience. You've been around the sun a few more times. But yeah, I mean, like the first 3 games, it's like, yeah, you can make a case for the road team, sure, but I think it was pretty clear that the 3 home teams were favored for a reason. Obviously, Buffalo and Kansas City have been evenly matched up, and Buffalo needed a good streak to get back into it. And like I just said a moment ago, their biggest issue showed up once again in the biggest moment. Unfortunately for them, that means they're heading home. And John, I jokingly say like, hey, maybe all of a sudden, Bill Belichick turns his attention to Buffalo. But, at the end of the day, if you can manage the issues that Buffalo has, then maybe an elite head coach can help them get over the hump. But you can also make an argument that their window is very firmly shut because they have a lot of free agents, and some of the players that they have signed, i.e. guys like Von Miller, cost quite a bit of money. So what does this Buffalo team do from here? I'm not sure. This isn't a team that was 14-3 and unfortunately fell short. No, I mean, they had to win every single game down the stretch just to get into the playoffs. So you might start, if you're starting from exactly where you were this season, then you're already kind of behind. Add in the fact that you're going to be losing a lot of talent and you have some overpriced veterans that might be hard to get rid of. So, unfortunately for Bills fans, I apologize if you're listening, but it might get a little bit worse than what we saw last night. And last night was pretty disappointing considering, I mean, come on, John, wide right? Like, really? Of all the teams, of all this, and I almost knew that was going to happen too. I'm not trying to sit here in hindsight and say, well, I saw it coming. I'm not going to okay, you know how to say that. I'm not going to do that. Okay. But I would be lying if I said I said I didn't think, well, they're going to probably miss this, aren't they? And behold, wide right, John, with Buffalo. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, people have said that those are the 2 worst words to be so wide right. I would think the 2 most disappointing words or the scariest word to say in Buffalo would be more snow, but we'll go with wide right for this day because of what happened yesterday in that game. Sure. Like a headline of the Buffalo News should be wide right again, just because that means so much to that organization. And that Super Bowl, obviously, if Norwood hits that, they win the game. By missing it, they lose the game. It was one of those plays like in basketball, you're down one, you take a shot, you either win it or lose it. And that was the situation.
And just think about the repercussions for one defensive coordinator for that team that won.
Right, exactly. Yeah. He was head coach of the Cleveland Browns a month later, right? And rest is history. Yeah, I would think Buffalo has got to examine, Sean McDermott. He moved on from his defensive coordinator or his offensive coordinator. At some point you have to lay some of the blame or more of the blame on him. And I referenced on Friday the mid-'70s to late '70s Rams who went to the playoffs 5 straight years with Chuck Knox as coach, and they had a bunch of Pro Bowlers, and every year they were supposed to make it to the Super Bowl, and they never did. And then they moved on from Chuck Knox, who to me is a borderline Hall of Fame coach. I mean, he had success in Seattle, he had success in Buffalo too. Really good coach. They moved on, and maybe Buffalo's in that situation. Their payroll is the highest in football. I don't think the Pagulas are impatient because, like you said, the window is closing, especially with some of those big contracts. And I think you also have to look at Stephon Diggs, whose play the second half of the year was not that great. And again, he can be a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Do you move on from him, and do you try to draft a wide receiver in the first round? It's a fairly deep wide receiver group coming into the draft. Josh Allen, a young guy that he can mold and have as his favorite toy.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's a lot of questions. Braden brings up a great point. One of the biggest blunders was that decision to go for a fake punt. Now, was that a direct call from the head coach? I don't know. Was it because Kansas City only had 10 players on the field, so which, as Braden points out, makes it even more hilarious because they couldn't even convert that. Yep. It was just an odd time to do it. It was a little, again, sometimes you get a little belligerent play calling, and I think that was an example of that. And those are the issues that Buffalo has to deal with now. All of a sudden, I mean, thank God that they got that fortunate bounce through the ball through the back of the end zone, or that game would have been over much sooner than what it actually was. So, look, I said it last week, and you just brought it up here a minute ago. They've already moved on from their offensive coordinator. They've moved on from their defensive coordinator. They're not going to blame Josh Allen, certainly not after on Sunday. So, I mean, who's next? Well, it's clearly Sean McDermott, and I'm not saying it's not justified. I'm saying it's very justified. And I don't know what they do from here, John. Again, I mean, like I said, I jokingly bring up Bill Belichick. I think he would make them better, but again, the issues are how can they navigate the personnel issues that they have, whether it's overpriced.
Yep, exactly. And they've built a good roster. So, would Belichick say, okay, I'm going to go up there just to coach? And that might be the perfect situation because we're talking a 3-year window with Belichick. He's 72 in April. Perfect, right? You would think your window might still be cracked open a little bit and you have him as your head coach and maybe tighten some things up. As far as the fake punt, like I've always believed, okay, fake punt can be done in certain situations. But to me, don't you want the ball in the hands of your best player to make the play?
Right.
And that would be Josh Allen, not a punter or an upman or whatever. Let the best guy make the play. Because it's maddening if you're a Bills fan, Ian, because you put everything into a blender, what they did last night, right? Balance on offense, 180 yards passing, 180 yards rushing. They held the ball for 31 more plays in Kansas City. They had no turnovers, although unsuccessful fake punt to me is a turnover. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Same thing. Or to me, even an unsuccessful fourth down attempt is kind of a turnover. They only had 28 yards in penalties. Josh Allen was brilliant. I mean, it's like everything that you figured they needed to do to win, throw it in the blender, mix it up, that's going to lead to a victory, and it didn't. So I think Buffalo walked off the field like a lot of teams walked off the field against the Patriots in their dynasty run when they walked off and said, geez, we think we're better than them. We played pretty well, but they just beat us because they just find that little edge, right, that they just make one more play than us and they're moving on and we're eliminated. And that's going to be frustrating. If you get blown out, you tip your cap and say, that team was better on this day. If you're Buffalo, they're like, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, it's like, what else what more do they have to do? Now, again, Patrick Mahomes was great, but this Kansas City defense, at least for the first half, didn't look like the unit we saw all season, which was very stingy. So, like, how do you not take advantage of that? Well, Buffalo kind of did. I mean, they punted once, but, their defense on the flip side was not up to stuff. And, you sit there and you think about the little decision to go back to the fake punt. You go back to some of these other decisions that were made throughout the course of that's the difference between a guy like Andy Reid and Sean McDermott and how Kansas City around the block a few times. They know what they're doing. This is why they win these games, and this is why the Patriots win those games, because of that experience. They understand these like little swings. They don't have these emotional ups and downs like a lot of other teams do, who sometimes you just get on that racetrack, you lose control of that car, and you're all over the place. But Kansas City and teams like the Patriots in the past knew when to hit the brake around the corner and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a fan of racing whatsoever, so I don't know why I'm bringing in some racing analogy. But the point is, they just knew how to navigate those situations a lot better than Buffalo clearly does. And part of that's coaching, part of it's just experience, part of it's the quarterback. Although, again, no, I'm not saying that like Allen was I think he clearly was Buffalo's best player on the field last night, and you can argue that he was the overall best player. But both quarterbacks, like I said, were fantastic last night. Just unfortunately, only one of them moves on. So, and Brain says
it happened too in this situation. Not to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Sticking with football, if you look at this, once you've won, and the Patriots won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, so they just went on the field with a little bit more confidence than the other teams. The same thing now with Kansas City. It takes some pressure off. Like if Kansas City loses last night, okay, come back next year. You've won 2 Super Bowls. You're on your way. Buffalo feels almost like the Red Sox till 2004.
Yeah,
like,
so they press.
2004, amazing. Yeah, when the Red Sox are down 3 games to none, down 4-3 with in the 9th inning against the Yankees, to come back against that team, with all that history, because Buffalo right now not only is fighting the opponent, they're fighting history at this point, right? I mean, again, you miss a field goal to tie the game, and the first thing we think of is a play from 33 years ago when they could have won a Super Bowl, right? So that drowns an organization. Now Kansas City, they're the team that goes on the field feeling confident. Like San Francisco's going to face that on Sunday, right? They have way more pressure than the Lions. The Lions in the NFC Championship game for the first time since the George H.W. Bush administration. They're playing now with house money. Baltimore has a ton of pressure on them Sunday. For Baltimore and San Francisco, they're supposed to be the 2 best teams. They're at home. They're supposed to win these games on Sunday. Kansas City's won 2 Super Bowls. The pressure's off them a little bit, and Detroit is the darling of the tournament right now. They feel like the 2016 Cubs. Like everybody's rooting for the Lions, right? I mean, who is it?
Right, and look, I mean, there's again, what's more of an advantage? Who knows? To play freely or to play freely with confidence, and that's what the Chiefs are doing, and that's a great advantage to have. So, but all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk more about this stuff and anything else that's going on, because, well, hey, we only got 3 NFL games left, and that's a little sad, but hey, they're 3 pretty important games, and I'm looking forward to them. So, thank you everyone for listening and tuning in, enjoying the chat. Thank you everyone, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.